Brad Wenstrup, congressman, doctor, and soldier, welcome again to the Bill Cunningham Show. And Congressman, let's get into, first of all, I know you've served in Iraq and Afghanistan. At no point when that was going on did I somehow think we could lose a war and that nation would overtake the United States of America. Of course, we lost Iraq, we lost Afghanistan, but I never had a thought in my mind, well, the Afghan warlords are going to come to America and nuke us all. I never thought the same thing about Vietnam or Korea. But here we sit, and at the end, really the last day or two of February, and I've, in the back of my mind, a day or two ago, when Vladimir Putin said that tactical nuclear weapons are enlarge the status of them and the minds of the generals, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, my God, 1914, World War I. So give us an overview from your perspective as to where we are now in Ukraine and where we go from here.
Well, I was in Ukraine in December, right before Christmas, and it came across to me as a westernized nation at this point, and it was very peaceful, and people going about their business. They're used to this monster being on their border, if you will. And in so many ways, I think the reaction of the world is we're seeing democracy versus authoritarianism and freedom versus oppression. You know, just a little bit of a history. Obviously, the Soviet Union fell in '91. In 2005, President Putin gave a speech where he said that the fall of the USSR, Soviet Union, was the greatest geopolitical catastrophe of the century. Well, for who? Yeah. I guess just for him and for his power. But from there, Russia, in 1994, with the Russian Federation, with UK, and with Ukraine, they did the Budapest Memorandum, and they said, we'll take the nuclear weapons out of Ukraine, but Russia must respect the independence and sovereignty of Ukraine. Well, that was never going to be good enough for Putin. And, you know, he has, in my mind, some people will call hubris syndrome. You know, this is someone who's narcissistic. His interest is over that of his nation. He shows contempt for people. It affects his judgment. And I think we're seeing that because he feels no personal risk. And I got to think that Zelensky's courage right now is probably really eating at him because he thought he would just walk right in. But the morale of the Russian troops, from what I hear from the Ukrainian boots on the ground, is the morale of Russian troops is horrible. They said, why are we here? And you're going to get the Belarusian troops involved as well, and it's going to be even more so for them. But the Ukrainians, they know why they're there. They know why they're there. You know, as you mentioned, you know, I'm a soldier. I've been to war. Morale matters. And the bravery of the citizens, and you've got the members of their parliament and their citizens carrying weapons, they're not going down easily. But, you know, I don't understand the mindset of someone like Putin. You know, you have 32 countries around you that make up NATO. They exist in this organization because of you. At some point, do you not look in the mirror and say, is it me or is it them? You know, so I think that what we're seeing right now is a very united NATO and a European Union, and Germany's coming around more so than I had anticipated them to. And maybe in some ways this is the shot heard around the world that can be the end of Putin. Our intelligence community had this right. And they could assess whether he was just doing exercise, whether he was on offense, whether he was on defense. Look, he went into Crimea in 2014 and just walked in there under Obama. Nothing happened really under President Trump. No. Now he has seen a President Biden, that he feels he can test. You saw what happened in Afghanistan and things like that. But there's things we can do. And in talking to the Ukrainians, they really would like to see the Russians taken out of SWIFT, which is the International Financial Transaction Organization, and make sanctions that actually hurt. And time is of the essence, because you don't just end this and immediately by putting in sanctions. It won't happen. It takes time. And he's prepared for it. You think he didn't know that that would come? But when you were talking about the no-fly zone, you know, I think some countries are saying, like Canada, it's closed its airspace to all Russian aircraft operators. We're going to exclude you from the international community, and that's what we need to do.
Yeah, and in fact, it's been announced now you can't fly into to Moscow. You can't fly out of Moscow. The SWIFT thing is going to be gigantic. There were some reporters last night who said this morning that they had to settle up their bill now before Monday opens up and before Monday and Tuesday happens in Moscow. They had to settle up their bill, and inflation was rampant anyway. So there's pain inflicted upon the Russian people, but not upon Vladimir Putin. Let's get back to that no-fly zone. It's one thing to have a no-fly zone in Syria or in Afghanistan, but a no-fly zone would mean in Ukraine that American flyers would be confronting Russian planes, and then what happens? Are you in favor of a no-fly zone in the Ukraine?
Well, they are. I know the Ukrainians would like to have one, and they would like to have that type of protection. And there are some assets that are coming their way to EU member countries, and they're in talks to supply Ukraine with jet fighters. Okay, so that would be their no-fly zone. But in the other areas, it's more just denying them commercial flights and the ability to land in our country. Good. And I think that's more what we're seeing in the other areas, as opposed to what we saw in Iraq with the no-fly zone, where we actually would attack.
How does this work out? I mean, explain to me. The Russians obviously could crush, if they wanted, Ukraine, carpet bombing, which they did in Chechnya. They could do that, but they haven't done it yet. On the other hand, Zelensky, the last 4 or 5 days, has been like George Washington. I mean, this guy is incredible. He was given an option to take Uber out of the country. He said, no, I need ammunition, not a ride. This guy's status is gigantic. How at some point, the Russians are going to militarily win? Am I right or wrong about that? You're a soldier, because I think they can win. And look what they did in Chechnya. Basically carpet bombed the place. Is it true that whether it's a week or 10 days, that the Russians will win militarily? And then what? And then what happens? Did you agree with that the Russians militarily will win? Not can they win. Sure they can. Will they win?
Yeah, I think that they can, but I think what they'll be facing is the devastation at home, ultimately, and that's what we hope for, because the Ukrainians are going to fight. I mean, the college students, they're out there, they're making bombs, they're doing whatever they can. Putin is upset because it hasn't happened already, that it's taken longer than he thought. That's because his troops, many of them, don't want to be there. They don't even know why they're there. So when Russians start seeing empty refrigerators at home, they'll see that he doesn't care about them, because the most of them aren't with him. You see the protests in the streets that are taking place inside of Russia today. What the Ukrainians want from others is javelins, stingers, patriots, and tomahawks. They did stop, reportedly, a dam attack, missiles. They were able to shoot down the missile, apparently. What I'm hearing from them, and it makes complete sense, is that we and others have to quit buying oil and gas from Russia.
Yes.
That embargo is going to cripple them more than anything. That is their lifeline. And the way the Ukrainians phrase it right now is the Russian and oil gas sales just equal blood on the Ukrainian streets. And so if Putin is successful, my fear is that NATO is next. He's just going to keep on going. He's made himself very clear in 2005 with this speech. And I think dictators around the world and in countries with similar type of steps, they're watching him. They're watching him. But look, they saw him walk right in 2014 to Crimea. And Obama sent over to the Ukraine some blankets and MREs.
Right.
That doesn't stop the Russian army. And so, and then, they have seen what happened in Afghanistan. And so they're feeling, they feel pretty empowered to do this. Now we got the concern of Putin saying that we're going into a special mode where our nukes are connected, which means, they can be more ready to be used. We've seen the United States try and use China as a mediator, which to me is ridiculous. You can't trust the Chinese in this situation. And the Ukrainians are saying, we're going to have these talks with Belarus, and you summed it up pretty well beforehand of what might happen at the beginning of this conversation. But the Ukrainians are saying they don't need us in these talks, right?
No.
This is not Hunter and Joe Biden's Ukraine right now. This is a different Ukraine. And it's got a courageous leader, and the people are with him, and I think that's huge.
Congressman, we talk about Russia being a large gas station with a first-class military, at least relatively good. I think the ground forces aren't nearly as dominant as their 6,000 nukes. And when you talk about oil and gas, Well, I watched Jen Psaki did an interview this morning in which she talked about global warming again and carbon neutral and all that kind of crap. All we have to do is open the spigot and announce we're going to do it. And I don't think if Biden has it in him to do it with the State of the Union address coming up. But nonetheless, number one, it puts hundreds of thousands of Americans to work. Number two, it lowers the price of gasoline for Americans. Number three, it lowers the cost of oil, which is a hit to the pocketbook of Russia. And number four, it sends the message to Russia and to Vladimir Putin. There's more sanctions are coming. There's no possible way that us not having the Keystone Pipeline agreed, but the second pipeline, of course, from Russia to Germany, Biden green-lighted until recently. But nonetheless, if we would have the Trump energy policy, imagine the position that Russia would then be in as we speak.
Totally. Biden immediately took sanctions off. Now he's saying, oh, we're putting sanctions on. Well, what do you think the Trump administration was trying to do with this? He saw the threat that they were, and he saw that is their lifeline, and that would diminish them greatly until they behave better on the world stage, and they haven't. You know what? Maybe AOC had something. She said that the world was going to end in 10 years or 12 years, I think she said. Yeah. Well, she was blaming that on fossil fuels. The fact of the matter is, if we don't have our own and use our own fossil fuels, we may be in much bigger trouble, especially if we continue to import hundreds of thousands of barrels of crude oil from Russia every day, which we have been doing. This only empowers them to empower their military to do what the things that they are doing right now, and they can weaponize what they are doing in Europe. And I think Germany finally realizes that. You're seeing Germany's committing to spend $100 billion on defense,
right?
And on F-35s and other armaments. Kosovo is asking for accelerated membership into NATO.
How about in Finland? Finland.
And they said we'll host an American military base.
Sweden. You got to be kidding me.
These countries are coming. Switzerland's even speaking out, so they're likely to cut off the oligarchs from their accounts. They should. This is maniacal. I don't know how else to put it in this day and age. And this man maybe he's ill. I don't know. But it doesn't seem to make sense. He's bent on what it might mean to him, but certainly not what it means to his own people and to the world.
And the other thing, when America uses oil products and natural gas, there's all kinds of environmental standards. Every day, we import about 500,000 barrels of oil a day from Russia. We give to the Russians, as we speak, millions of dollars every day. So instead of having good-paying jobs in the energy sector, which also would lower the cost of gasoline at the pump, which also would hurt Russia, the environmental standards are much better in America than in Russia. So on every front, it makes a whole bunch of sense. Before I let you go, Congressman, are you ready for the big question?
Sure.
In the back of my mind, I see a desperate, failing Russia with Vladimir Putin in charge. He has $650 billion in reserves. He makes Elon Musk look like a pauper. The guy has raped financially Russia for the past 22 years. He's a murderer and he's a thug. And so if he's going down hard, he talks about, I've looked about tactical nuclear weapons as opposed to intercontinental ballistic missiles. And let's say the military is losing and there's rioting in the streets. And all of a sudden, the only way out in Vladimir Putin's mind is to set off a couple dozen tactical nukes. I guess in the back of my mind, that's a concern that I have. Am I wrong?
I think it's a legitimate concern because if you've got someone who seemingly is not all there as far as where he should be standing in this world and what is taking place, it is a concern because it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense that he would do this to his people. Again, when you have that hubris and you have that ego, that is a problem. But I would say if the day comes that he is taken down and Ukraine is set free from this, there'll be parades in Ukraine. I think there'll be parades in the streets of Russia by the Russian people that this man has gone for what he's putting them through as well.
Russia has many assets. They're second to America in natural gas and oil. It should be a productive, democratic, capitalistic country. It started off wrong in 1917. It's been over 100 years. The Ukraine people were starved to death. Stalin starved to death about 5 million Ukrainians in the 1930s. and the old republics all broke away. None of them wanted to get back, except you might say Belarus, but let's face it, they were bribed and they were told they had to come back. And looks to me like we're in perilous times. And I wish we did not have feckless leadership in Washington. And I wish we had a president that can understand the power of oil right now, but he doesn't do it because his press secretary says we still have to stick with carbon neutral environmental standards, which are not being followed at all in Russia. They're being followed here, though. But, Congressman, we got to go. Love having you on. You've been to the Ukraine. You know where the bodies are buried over there. You're a soldier. And thank you once again for your perspective. Congressman Brad Wenstrup, thank you very much.